This audio presentation of Metaphysics for Everyone by Connie Mendez is brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2014. All rights reserved. Introduction. This book is not written for academic study. It is written to be understood and used. A college degree in psychology, philosophy, or metaphysics isn't required. All you need is a desire to achieve a richer, more fulfilling life and apply the basic truth you find in these pages. It is estimated that we use only 10% of our brain cells, 10% of our potential mental powers. But those dormant, unused cells are there waiting, ready to be awakened every time we hear or read or experience something new to us. And the second time we come across that new thought or experience, more cells are aroused, more connections are made, and we understand it a little better. Within a short while, the mind becomes enlightened as more and more awakened cells begin to work on the new concept. In other words, the acceptance and understanding of ideas is an automatic process that begins with the simple activity of repetition. There is no superhuman effort, no burst of genius required. Only the desire to learn and the patience to read and reread until the ideas behind the words become automatic, and suddenly, or so it seems, understanding is there. It is simply that simple. Carry this book with you, read a copy next to your favorite chair or bedside table. Read and reread, especially when you are faced with a problem or with a distressing life situation. You'll discover something truly amazing. You will open the book at random, and within a few sentences, you will find yourself thinking, "This could have been written for me." And you'll be right, it was. Jesus Christ said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." Metaphysics is one of those mansions, or dimensions. It is the study of mental, spiritual laws. It does not deal with spiritualism itself, although this is another of those mansions. The little book has brought peace, fulfillment, and prosperity to many. May it bring it to you, and may you be blessed. Connie Mendez. Dynamic Christianity. Before you undertake any job, from a career to turning up your own car, you have to know something about it. You go to school, you apprentice yourself to someone skilled in that particular enterprise. It's just good sense. And yet there is one job we all find ourselves thrust blindly into, untrained, uneducated, without the vaguest idea of the hazards involved or the goals to be achieved. And it is the most difficult job on earth, the job of life. To make it even more confusing, we don't even know what life is all about. It's full of contradictions. Why do some, born with wealth, health, and good fortune, turn all these advantages into a downward spiral of misfortune and misery? Why do others achieve good fortune without visible effort? We search for the logic behind these contradictory facts, the rules of the game we find ourselves caught up in. We make guesses, supposition, and we indulge in wishful thinking, and still most of us are puzzled at the hour of our death as we were at the hour of our birth. What was it all about? There is one great truth that can guide us in the direction of understanding. What you think is. Thoughts are things, and your thoughts, your attitude, are what will determine everything that happens in your life. What you think about yourself, about others, about the world and events that surround you control your life, and you are at the control. Like all great truth, this fact is startlingly simple put into words. If you think you are healthy, you will be healthy. But if you turn your thinking around and begin to fear illness, you will feel ill. And feeling sick is being sick. If you are born to riches, it's likely that you will continue to grow in wealth unless someone convinces you that destiny exists, and you will have no control over it. Then any little setback will magnify itself into catastrophe. You will begin to believe that your fortunes have changed, and once you believe that, they will change. Your life and everything that happens to you is a product of the beliefs you hold and the words you say. This is a principle, a basic, unchanging law called the principle of mentalism. If you believe that accidents lurk around every corner just waiting to happen to you, if you are convinced that the ailments of old age are inevitable, if you are certain that bad luck dogs your every step, all these beliefs will manifest themselves in everything you do. But just the opposite is equally true. If you believe that only good will come to you, then it will. This is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you make a prediction, good or bad, you begin to make it come true. We are never conscious of all the ideas that inhabit our minds. Their formation is continuous, building on everything we hear, see, and learn. Yet our actions are the product of those ideas, the majority of which lie below the level of conscious thought, and we are just as ignorant of the very laws that govern our lives, the so-called laws of creation, and we spend our lives haphazardly constructing conditions which conflict with those laws. Blindly, with neither compass nor rudder, we go on watching grand ideas turn into disappointment, blaming our failures on life itself, and chalking it all up to the will of God. Since you have read this far, you probably begun to realize that a human being is not, as you may have been led to believe, a sea-tossed cork with no direction other than the whim of the elements. Far from it. Man's life, his world, his circumstance, and the events of his life are the products of his creation, his alone. He is the ruler of his own mental empire, and if he chooses to believe that he is that storm-racked cork, he is free to be so. Free is the key word here. To be born with free will means to have that individual right to choose one's own direction. We can think positively or negatively, optimistically or pessimistically. We can think of evil and ugliness and bring them into being, or we can think of beauty, goodness, and happiness, and create them for our environment, external and internal. Metaphysics has always taught that what we think about most strongly, most often passes into our subconscious, where it establishes itself and becomes a reflex. Modern psychology has recently discovered this ancient truth. When a human being finds himself immersed in the ocean of his ignorance and a disaster of his own making, he will usually turn to God and pray for deliverance from this misery. And it appears that sometimes God will answer and sometimes not. If not, family and friends will offer the inadequate consolation that it is God's will. It sounds like another way of saying God's ill will, or at least to a person involved. But this is in direct conflict with what we have been taught about the Creator. He is our Father, full of love and compassion, infinitely wise, eternally and mercifully with us. How can such a wise and loving Father allow such suffering to his own children? We, as merely mortal parents, could never bring ourselves to inflict such punishment on our children. We could not condemn a child to eternal flames for making the natural mistakes of childhood ignorance. Yet we seem to believe that God could do so, that he has all the characteristics of a capricious schoolmaster, one who is petulant, vindictive, and full of ill will, always on the watch for the slightest misdeed and quick to subject us to the most unfair and disproportionate punishment. This is the way we thought in our infancy, before we learned the rules of behavior, and this is the way we must continue to think until we learn the rules of life. We have already learned that the calamities of life are of our own creation, and this is one way in which we are fashioned in God's image and likeness. We are, each and every one of us, the creators of our own circumstance. Why is it then that God seems to hear us at some times and not at others? The answer lies in the nature of prayer. Prayer is the purest and highest form of thought. It is polarizing the mind to the highest possible degree. When we pray, we think of and toward God. We create vibrations of mental light, and thoughts of God transform the darkness surrounding us, as if we brought a brilliant lamp into the darkest of rooms. And if we pray to God as a loving, caring Father who wishes nothing but joy and fulfillment to his children, he will listen. But if we pray, as so many of us do, in terms such as, "Please God, solve this problem for me, even though I know I somehow deserve to be miserable, and this is all some kind of test of my worth, which I don't understand," well, all we are telling him is that we really don't think our prayers are worthy of answering. Furthermore, we are praying to the malevolent schoolmaster, that vindictive God who likes nothing better than to condemn us for our transgressions. In other words, we're praying to the wrong God, and to paraphrase, you get what you pray for. God is not the judge, the policeman, the tyrant, or the executioner that so many of us have been taught. He is simply the one who created the laws of existence. Whether we choose to abide by them or ignore them is our decision, and the results of such a decision are our doing. There are 7 of these laws, 7 principles that govern all things at all times. They are unchanging and unending. They are the order and harmony of creation. The soul has no need for policemen or judges, for he who does not abide by these laws creates his own punishment. Therefore, once you have learned these laws and have learned to think correctly, you will automatically be following the laws, and all good that God wishes for you will show itself. St. Paul said that God is closer to us than our feet, our hands, the very air we take into our lungs. We do not have to shout for him to hear. Merely thinking of him is enough. The disarray of our lives will begin to rearrange itself into order. He created us and knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows why we behave as we do, and he does not expect us to behave as saints when we are only learning to walk in this spiritual world. At this point, I don't want you to believe a single word I have written without proving it to yourself. This is your divine and sovereign right. Don't do as you have done in the past, accepting all you are told and all that you see at face value, until you have taken the opportunity to judge for yourself between good and evil. The mechanics of thought. Awake or asleep, we spend 24 hours a day in unceasing thought. Like an unedited film, disconnected thoughts run through our mind, triggered by every sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or experience. And a few of these thoughts we hold and examine more closely than the rest. Why? Because these few have stimulated some feeling within, whether a feeling of fear or repulsion, affection or attraction. It isn't the nature of the feeling, but the strength of it, the interest it holds, and so we concentrate on it, perhaps mention it to someone else. It is this repetition, this strength of interest that leads a thought into the unconscious where it is engraved into memory. This is the process of meditation. Once an idea is etched into the subconscious, it becomes a reflex. Just as your leg jerks when the doctor taps you under the kneecap with his rubber hammer, you experience a feeling, an attitude, a reaction when one of those deeply ingrained ideas is touched upon by some event or experience in your life. Your attitude reflects the original feeling you experienced when you first pondered that idea. In metaphysics, we call this a concept in the sense of a belief or conviction. The subconsciousness is incapable of discrimination. It does not think for itself. It cannot protest, nor does it have free will. Its only function is to summon up a reflex according to a command from the sensory and emotional centers of the conscious mind. In this sense, it is a computer memory, even more complex than the most capacious data storage system ever made. And it is just as emotionless as a computer. It has no sense of humor and makes no distinction between an order given jokingly or a serious command. If your nose is a bit larger than the standards of beauty call for, you may jokingly refer to it as a potato nose, as a minor defense mechanism. But the humorless subconscious will attempt to carry out your command in its most literal sense, to make your nose look more and more like your description. And soon it will. To you, because of repetition. To others, because you will unconsciously begin to hold your head a certain way, and repeat the certain phrase so often that others will begin to notice what had probably escaped their attention in the first place. The word metaphysics means beyond the physical, and metaphysics is the science which deals with all things undetectable by the physical senses. It gives reason to those we don't understand, the mysteries that surround us, all those things that seem not to have a reasonable explanation. Yet as shrouded as the subject matter may be, metaphysics is a most precise science, a fact you will discover for yourself as you read on. Do you remember the first time you heard the phrase, catch a cold? Probably you were too young to remember, but your subconscious does. It was said by your elders who taught you that a cold was something to be feared or at least avoided, and with repetition you adopted this feeling. Never get your feet wet, don't get caught in a draft, stay away from people who are coughing, sneezing, or sniffling, because you'll soon be doing the same. Little by little this became engraved on your subconscious, forming a reflex center. You never had to think about it to heed these warnings. The reflex did it for you, and the damage was done. Because your subconscious will do its best to give you all the symptoms of a cold whenever you get caught in one of those cold-catching situations. Some people don't even need the situations. Once they hear about a bug that's going around, a tickle begins in the back of their throat. We know today that colds aren't caused by wet feet or open windows, but the idea is already there, firmly implanted and rooted to resist the firm tugs of reason, and radio and TV have done their best to nourish these erroneous roots. All the influence of your formative years have become reflex such as this, and these are the automatic causes of all that is bad, all that is good that happens to you. These reflexes are your life pattern, a basement full of other people's ideas which affect every facet of your life, body, soul, and mind. But the important point is that if you have not accepted these ideas, if you haven't been pounded into you like a nail into the wood, if you had been able to exercise your free will, no germ or virus, no power on earth could have been able to make your subconscious react in any way other than the way you wished. Your will, negative or positive, is the magnet that attracts those germs or viruses in your direction with a force far stronger than the actual circumstance of a germ-laden environment. Again, I stress, your negative or positive attitude towards the facts is what will determine the outcome for you. The infallible formula. We have found that the human mind is a storehouse of accumulated opinions, concepts, and convictions, many of which are contrary to truth and in conflict with the basic principle of creation. It is these erroneous thoughts which manifest themselves as suffering and problems that afflict us, sickness, accidents, pains, arguments, disharmony, poverty, failure, and even death. None of these misconceptions fits with the boundary of truth. Unfortunately, there are ways to erase these false beliefs and replace them with truth, which will not only produce the happy and positive conditions we desire, but will prevent the return of those negative influences. With the establishment of truth in our subconscious minds, the order has been changed. The magnet has reversed its polarity, and it becomes impossible to attract the negative forces which no longer produce any response for us. The infallible formula is simply this. Whenever something undesirable happens to you, you fall ill, have an accident, are robbed, are offended, or emotionally hurt by someone, you have been the cause of hurt to another, you have been afflicted by a physical, moral, or character defect. You find yourself hating another. You suffer from the pangs of too much love or jealousy, or love misdirected. You are the victim of injustice. If any from the infinite list of misfortunes and can befall a human being happens to you, you must seek and know the truth. Jesus Christ, the greatest of the metaphysical masters, said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." What is the truth? Simply, it is perfect harmony. And if what has happened to you is not born of harmony, justice, goodness, freedom, health, wisdom, love, or joy, then it is not truth. It acts in contradistinction to the supreme harmony. It is a lie. Your higher self is a perfect being. It always has been. It cannot become ill because it is life. Because it is life, it cannot die. It cannot age, suffer, fear, nor sin. It has no need to fight. It is unchanging. It is beautiful. It is love, intelligence, wisdom, and joy. In this you have the truth, your truth and mine, the truth of every human being at this moment and for all time. That isn't to say that every human being is God, no more than a single drop of the water is the ocean, but that drop is a part of the ocean and contains within itself all that is in the ocean. From a molecular viewpoint, that droplet is oceanic in dimension. It has been stated that whatever you project, whatever is happening to you, whatever you are doing or suffering that goes against perfect harmony, is due to an erroneous belief within you, which is manifesting itself outside you because of your own reflex. This has nothing to do with your essence, your superior being. This is unchangeable, and its conditions and circumstances are at all times perfect. And so when faced by adverse conditions, such as those mentioned a few paragraphs ago, keep in mind that I have said and apply the truth simply by saying mentally or out loud, "I do not accept it." Say it firmly, but with infinite gentleness. Mental efforts do not need physical force. Neither thought nor soul have or require muscles. Their strength derives from spiritual force. So when you say, "I do not accept it," do so as though you were saying, "I don't want this." Calmly, yet with complete conviction and firmness, without shouting, violence, or display. You are making a statement. After having made your statement, remember that your higher self, that superior being, together with all its conditions, is perfect. Now say, "I declare the truth of this problem to be harmony, love, intelligence, justice, abundance, life, health, any and all positive qualities which oppose the negative condition in which you find yourself." Thank you, Father, for I know you have heard me. At this point, there is no need for you to believe what you are reading. You must only believe what you say, that you do not, will not accept this situation, that it is contrary to harmony, that harmony will be restored. If you believe and apply these thoughts, you will soon come to believe their power. In the language of metaphysics, this is called a treatment, and for it to be effective, a positive attitude must be maintained. This continuing positive reinforcement is what builds a new reflex, to replace the negative one which brought about unwanted circumstance. Belief begins with hope, not with doubt. Therefore, you cannot doubt the efficacy of the treatment, nor can you express that previous concept, opinion, and belief which led to the unpleasant situation. Such words would only nullify the positive effect. St. Paul said, "But be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind," Romans 12:2. This is the purpose of the treatment, transforming the mental pattern that has been dominating the subconscious, the mental climate that has created the negative environment in which you have been living. This total transformation comes with the changing of each old inharmonious belief as it arises in life or in the conscious, changing, renewing such belief to conform with the truth. Metaphysically expressed, those convictions which have become most deeply embedded are called crystallizations. While these require much more effort to erase, every denial or disharmony or affirmation of truth erodes away at the false conception until we are left with nothing but the truth. And with the establishment of truth, you will discover miracles in every aspect of your life. What you see as defects within yourself are only illusions. Once you know the truth, the perfection of the higher self, the illusion of these flaws will fade and disappear, and you will be made again in the perfect form, the true self, your personal Christ, the image of the Father in which you were made. Any students of Christian metaphysics will confirm this. Never forget this great truth. Practice it from this moment on. The longer you act upon it, the greater the results we'll see in your personal evolution toward perfect harmony. Remember that you are as unique as your fingerprints. You are one of a kind, created to fulfill a purpose no one else can achieve. It has taken many thousands of years of evolution to produce the you that exists today. God's works are infinite, and you and I are but two expressions of his creation. You must remember, too, that your Christ is wisdom itself. He is God's highest expression of love for itself. He is God's highest expression of love for man, and he has been waiting for the many centuries for you to recognize him. Now the moment of recognition has arrived. Talk to him, consult him, wait for his answer. Once you have come to understand and accept that he is your supreme guide and teacher, you will witness his rebirth. Christ is the Messiah, and his coming is prophesied for this era. This isn't to say that he will dwell among us in the flesh, but that we can all find him born once again in our hearts and minds, which are his kingdom. This is why he was called Christ, the Greek word for Messiah, or anointed king in heaven. The decree. Every spoken word is a decree, which is outwardly manifested. The word is a spoken thought, and we have already learned of the power of thought. There are two sayings for Jesus that have been studied closely enough. One is this: "For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." Most have interpreted this as meaning that others will judge us by what we say and write, and though this is true, it is not the full meaning of Christ's own words. Jesus taught the truth of metaphysics at a time when the majority of the human race was not sufficiently mature to understand it. He was aware of this, and a number of times he said that there was much that he had to say, but he would not be able to understand. But there would always be a few who understood and would instruct others. "Who hath ears, let him hear." The second reference he made to the power of words was this: "Not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth. This defileth a man, for out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." In this respect, and response to a trivial question about dietary laws, lies a great metaphysical truth in all its explicit beauty. I suggest that you spend a day just listening to yourself, to the decrees you make so casually. Business is rotten. Kids today are a lost generation. We'll never get there in this traffic. You can't trust anyone these days. It's not safe to walk the streets. Don't touch that, you'll break it. With my luck, I'll probably. I've never seen it fail. I love, but it upsets my stomach. I can feel one of these migraines coming on. He'll rob you blind. She's a vicious gossip. There's no point in trying. Well, you can see the pattern. You've made the prophecies, and your attitudes govern your actions to the point where you make sure those prophecies are fulfilled. Never forget, every word you utter is a decree, whether positive or negative. When it is positive, it is manifested in good. When negative, only bad can follow. If your words are against someone, it's the same as condemning yourself. That person lives up or down to your expectation, at least where you are concerned. But when you speak with kindness and understanding towards others, they will return kindness and understanding to you. And when something unpleasant happens to you, don't think, "I wasn't expecting that." Think instead of statements you have made in the past that predicted and literally caused your misfortune. It could have been one of those idle statements like those above: "Every time I make an investment, I lose my shirt." Jesus was not one to waste words, and he expressed himself eloquently in saying, "For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." He is telling us that it is the feeling that accompanies a thought which engraves it upon the subconscious and gives it its power. The first feeling we learn is fear, taught to us by our parents in their desire to keep us from harm, by religious teachers in their desire to keep us from wrongdoing. Fear makes our hearts accelerate. We say, "My heart jumped in my throat," when we speak of great fear we've felt. And it is that fear from the heart that lies behind all the negative phrases mentioned above. St. Paul said that we would be transformed by the renewing of our minds. But how is this renewal accomplished? Start with your negative statements. Each time you find yourself saying something negative, you've pulled out an erroneous concept that was buried in your subconscious, and you'll recognize the feeling that goes along with it. Erase it. Whether the emotion is fear, dislike, despair, or anger, deny it as a lie and then affirm the truth, so that it will no longer manifest itself in your actions. You'll soon find that you speak differently, and your way of thinking has changed with this practice. Both you and your life will be transformed by this renewal of your mind. Increase your awareness of others. When you are in company, observe their language and the actions which bear out their statements. You will be aware of their concept by the result that they bring about themselves. Do not agree with what you hear when conversations turn negative. Think instead, I do not accept it for myself or for them. You don't have to tell them about the truth you are learning. In fact, it's best not to. Not because it's some secret ritual, but because they may not yet be ready for it. There is a proverb, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. People who are ready for advancement are automatically drawn to those who can lead them. It is a basic law of attraction, so there's no need for you to be a missionary. Trying to force the truth on people usually drives them in the other direction. That is what Jesus referred to when he said, Give not that which is holy to dogs, nor cast ye pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn against you and rend you. Faith can move mountains. You've heard this proverb repeated again and again, but it is usually said thoughtlessly, since few people really know what it means, know why or how faith can move mountains. Fear, too, can move mountains, for fear is merely a negative form of faith, faith in evil. It is the firm conviction that something bad is going to happen. Pure faith, on the other hand, is the certainty that whatever happens will be good. You don't fear that something good will happen to you, nor do you say, I have faith that something bad is coming. Faith is what we wish for, and you don't wish for harm to come to you, you fear it. But you attract what you fear, and so it comes about. And when it does happen, you may say, with a kind of perverse triumph, I knew it, I could feel it. And so you did, but don't go around boasting of your clairvoyant skills. What happened was that you thought about this or that misfortune with fear. You did indeed predict it with words and with emotions. And you have learned once again that whatever you think about with strong emotional intensity will come to pass. You fully expected it, and to expect, to anticipate, is to have faith, negative or positive. So now that you know that everything you anticipate with faith will come to you, what's to stop you from using that knowledge, that faith, to answer your every wish? It is a natural law, a divine ordinance. Christ said so in the familiar words, and all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive. St. Mark, too, stated specifically, whatsoever things you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them. St. Paul expressed it more broadly. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We have defined faith as the conviction of good. That conviction doesn't come out of thin air. It comes from knowledge, and that knowledge from experience. When you take a trip to a distant city, whether by air, train, or car, you're rarely afraid of missing a turn and ending up on the moon. Perhaps a Stone Age man without benefit of knowledge or maps or an airline schedule would be shaking with fear at the prospect. But you, with the knowledge of a civilized world at your disposal, know where you are going and when you are scheduled to arrive. This is faith based on awareness or knowledge. People fear evil and do not know to apply faith, or even have the slightest notion of what faith is, because they lack knowledge of the principle of creation. Faith is conviction, certainly, but these must be based on specific knowledge. You know that a certain distant city exists, that people often go there, that you can get there, and that the moon is nowhere near your destination. This is positive faith. The converse is equally true. If you want something and fear that you won't get it, you won't, simply because you denied yourself what you wanted in advance. Very likely your prayer was designed more to prepare yourself for disappointment than for fulfillment. O Lord, grant me this, even though I know I don't deserve it, and I'll understand if you don't, because you probably don't think it's right for me. That's a negative prayer, and it works negatively. Now let's try the positive. There's a metaphysical formula for getting anything you want. Use it for everything. Don't believe it simply because I say it. Try it. Let it work for you. Your faith, your belief must come with your own experience, your own knowledge. Your positive prayer. I wish for this. I wish it to be in harmony with the universe and according to God's will, His grace and His perfection. I thank you, Father, for I know you have heard me. You must not doubt for an instant. You have used a formula that some would call magic, which metaphysicians know is an application of universal principles. If you have fulfilled the law with complete belief, you will get your wish. But be patient. The more calmly you await fulfillment, the sooner you shall see results. Impatience, tension, mental stress destroy the treatment, as it is called in metaphysics. Let me explain the importance of the wording in this formula. By saying, in harmony with the universe, you avoid the danger of bringing harm to another in fulfilling your wish, and make it impossible for you to wish harm on another. By saying, according to God's will, you acknowledge that God may see that you specifically want may be less than perfect or even harmful for you, in which case He will substitute something even better than you had hoped for. In other words, you are asking God to make your wish as good as your intention. The words, His grace and His perfection, contain the ultimate safeguard. Let me give you an example of what can happen if you do not seek God's grace and perfection. A lady was hard-pressed for a specific amount of money, and she asked for it in specific terms for the 15th of the month. She firmly believed that she would be granted her wish, but her selfishness and indifference did not inspire her to ask in a way that would consider the welfare of others. The next day her daughter was hit by a car, and precisely on the 15th of that month she received the exact amount asked for, in the form of an insurance settlement for her daughter's accident. She used the formula incompletely and thus worked against the law, against even her own self-interest. To ask for something in God's grace and perfection is to work with the spiritual law. The law of God is always on that perfect spiritual level, where there are no obstacles or setbacks, no harm befalls anyone. No fights or struggles can take place. Here all things run smoothly, tempered with great love. This is the great truth you are beginning to know, that you will make you free. I thank you, Father, for I know you have heard me, is the ultimate expression of faith, which we can pronounce. Jesus taught and applied that faith when He broke the bread that fed 5,000 people, or changed water into wine at the wedding feast. We celebrate that faith by saying grace before a meal. We thank God for His graciousness before we experience its manifestation. As you read on, you will begin to see that everything Christ taught was metaphysical. Everything you wish for or need is waiting for you, waiting to manifest itself in response to your wish or prayer. God has already provided everything, and we only have to ask for these blessings as the need arises. All we have to remember is that we must never ask that any harm befalls another person, because that harm or its backlash will fall upon us. And whatever we ask for ourselves must be asked for all mankind in the name of harmony, for we are all children of the same Father. And He is a generous Father, therefore pray for abundance. Don't say, "Oh Lord, please give me a place to live, just a small apartment, that's all I asked," when your large family needs a large house. God's resources are as boundless as His generosity. If you ask for little, little is all you receive. Ask instead, "O Lord, give me and all mankind the wonders of your kingdom," and make a list. The spiritual muscle of faith needs much exercise as your arms and legs. Practice. Make that list of things you want. Make another list of things your life would be better without, from flaws to your character to adverse circumstances that surround you. Read the list every night, with the formula above, feeling no doubt, and give thanks each time you think about or speak about your wishes. As your wishes come true, cross them off your list. And once they have all been granted, don't be so ungrateful as to think that they'd probably have come true anyway. It is simply not true. They were granted because you asked for them in the right way, in good faith, and external aspects were adjusted so that they would happen in a natural way. Just as we strengthen our positive faith, we must work to weaken the negative faith, the faith in evil, which is fear. Sadly, we are all accustomed to fear for a wide array of reasons, but the following formula, repeated daily or more often, will wear away that reflex you have embedded in your subconscious. I am not afraid. I will not fear. I have faith that God is love, and that there is nothing to fear in all His creation. I will feel only that faith. When Roosevelt said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," he was voicing a great truth, a truth which you should say to yourself even when you are shaking with fear, especially then. Once you realize that fear is the great enemy, and not the conditions which make you feel it, you have begun to triumph over the fear. Your verbal wish to dissolve fear and replace it with faith is enough to place you on the positive pole of faith. You've probably heard about the psychological principle that says the most effective way to break a bad habit is to replace it with a good one. It is a metaphysical principle as well. Once you have begun the treatment of wearing away a deeply implanted reflex, you must fill that blank space with a new and opposite idea. Otherwise, that empty space will attract reflexes of the same kind that filled it before, for those reflexes are floating around everywhere, in conversation and the attitudes of others, looking for fertile ground. Replacing fear with faith denies these negative thought spaces in the subconscious. The constant repetition of your formula is necessary, remember. It took years for these negative ideas to form, so you must be willing to spend a few minutes a day erasing them, and gradually you will see things begin to happen just as you positively expect them to happen. Jesus said, "By their fruits ye shall know them." One meaning of this is that positive events are reflections of positive faith. This powerful tool, the power to decree, is an ancient one, first mentioned in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. I suggest you take a little time to read them now. As you read, you'll realize that man was not created to be a pawn in a game of circumstance, a victim of situation, or some puppet dancing on strings held by powers beyond his control. Quite the opposite. Man was placed at the zenith of his creation, rather than being, as some suppose, one of the least significant beings and its creations, and the wisdom, if he will use it, to rule this planet in perfection. We are created in God's image and have been given his powers, including the power of decree, and we have been given free will, the freedom to choose between the perfection that comes with perfect faith and the disharmony that is fear. Man is the means by which the wisdom, love, and power of the Creator can be fully expressed. We have been placed with all our concerns in a universe which is obedient to God's will, and has no other alternative than to carry out the decree of his supreme authority. Still, the authority God has given us is total, and our power to decree is absolute. And though the basic nature of the universe is perfect in the Creator's eye, it will appear to man only as man decrees it. The story of the Garden of Eden tells us that man lived in a universe of perfect order, maintaining his powers to think and decree in absolute harmony, until he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. From that point on, the concept there was an opposite to perfection, and that evil could happen has plagued man. His choices, what he could decree for himself, now included unhappiness in its countless forms. His power had become potentially self-defeating, but is still within our power to restore the harmony of our own lives, to recreate our own Eden. Love. This chapter will complete your introduction to the first principle of creation. This is the principle of mentalism that can be summed up as the mind is all. Jesus said, "Ye are gods," John 10:34. He meant that the creative capacity of God is within every one of us. Thus, with our thoughts alone, we can create or recreate all that we see in our environment, just as the whole of the creation was brought into being by a thought. You have already been introduced to the mechanics of this mental creation, the negative or positive character of that which has been created, the force required to determine its nature, the way to change the external aspects of that which you have created by denial or affirmation, the power of the spoken thought as a confirmation of attitude, and finally the infallible formula for creating and establishing the best possible personal universe for yourself. You are capable of bringing about the harmony in your life by following Jesus' advice to know the truth. And you have discovered that the truth is that the universe was created in perfection by a perfect being, and that evil has no power when confronted with this truth, because evil is not God's creation, and it must disappear when the truth of faith is perfection, is substituted for the thoughts that brought it about. Jesus admonished us, resist not evil, not because evil is so powerful, but because it is powerless in the face of truth, the good, which is the natural state of things. From now on, you won't have to cast about for someone to blame for your troubles. You merely have to look within and ask, what was my mental attitude about this situation? Was it positive or negative? Did I have faith or was I afraid? What kind of decrees did I make with my words? By their fruit ye shall know them. Simply be honest with yourself and you will see how you control things. If you like what you see, fine. If not, you have within you the power to change your circumstance. In Christian metaphysics, we believe God to be 7 aspects: love, truth, life, intelligence, soul, spirit, and principle. These are all abstract concepts. We cannot see, feel, or hear them, but we can feel and recognize their effects. They exist, act, and produce results, and not one of them can be denied. Love is the first aspect of God, the most powerful facet of his character, and it is the strongest and most sensitive of all forces. But very few of us know what love really is. Most of us think of it as being what we feel for parents, children, spouses, lovers, and so forth. Affection, tenderness, sexual attraction, dislike, and hate are all different degrees of sensation, and these sensations only skirt the border of love in its purest sense. Let us try to focus in on the heart of it by examining the sensations we are familiar with. On this scale, the central or neutral points are what we call tolerance and goodwill, with love at one extreme and hate and loathing at the other. This may seem to be unbalanced, since we consider goodwill a positive or loving kind of feeling. But if you think about it, you will see that tolerance and goodwill disappear when we love too much, for these feelings must apply to all, not simply to the object of our exaggerated affections. And of course, there is no tolerance or goodwill to be found in hatred, and this is the antithesis of love and the absence of goodwill. Jesus said, "Peace be unto those of goodwill," which implies that peace is goodwill, and at the extremes are departure from peace. Peace is at the center. It is the fulcrum of that perfect balance. All excesses unbalance the scale away from this center, away from peace. Even the excess of good things, money, love, prayer, charity, sacrifice, etc. This is what is meant by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In Genesis, the forbidden fruit is not so much knowledge as it is excess. God himself only mentions the term bad or evil in reference to excess. And in this connection, now would be a good time to pause and read the chapter in Ecclesiastes which begins, "There is a time for everything." Too much love? How can that be? But you already know the answer if you've ever seen a mother love her children so much that she never allows them to leave their nest, get married, or live any kind of independent life. This is not love, but a selfish desire to possess. The same is true of jealousy. These are not aspects of love, but aspects of excess, and an unbalancing of scale. For there is little peace in such a relationship, no room for tolerance and goodwill. Shakespeare understood. Speaking of music as the food of love, he said, "Give me the excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. Too much love destroys love." Generally, an excess of feeling is balanced by a corresponding lack of intelligence, another of the aspects of God. This, of course, will create indignation among people who consider themselves sensitive. But there is a great difference between sensitivity, which is a form of awareness, and sentimentality, which is allowing one's intelligence to be outweighed by unthinking emotion. Again, it's a matter of balance. If emotion is hot, then intelligence is cold. But peace is neither a polar blizzard nor the blistering heat of the Sahara sun. It is a comfortable warm spring day. A temperature blend of climates, now having a great emotional capacity, is desirable if it is balanced by an equal capacity for intelligent thought. This is what makes great artists. Their work is the vessel into which they intelligently pour their emotional potential. But the excessively emotive person pours that passion onto those who surround him or her, and the effect is not love but smothering. If you can recognize this quality in yourself, you have the honesty to correct it. And the method is meditation. Concentrate on the idea of intelligence. Do it daily, for as long as you can. The more time you invest, the better. Begin by asking yourself what intelligence is. Define it in yourself and man. Then go on to consider that everything, plants and animals included, has intelligence. Intelligence, remember, is a sense of awareness, of knowledge. Finalize this by affirming, "I have been created from the essence of God. With, by, and from his intelligence, I share the intelligence of God." A few days of this repeated treatment will produce a noticeable increase in your mental elasticity, and in a week you will experience a transformation in a way you feel love for others. There will be a new serenity and generosity, which you may never have thought possible. At the same time, you'll notice a change in the way others treat you. We may be all individuals, but what changes one affects others, all others in varying degrees. This upward step you take affects all of humanity, starting with those you love most, including yourself. Now let's deal with humanity's number one enemy, resentment and ill feeling. the generalized feelings which find their culmination in hate. Not one of us is totally free of resentment, yet it can embitter our whole life. It has a bad influence on every event or relationship, and is the cause of every disappointment we suffer, even though we have learned to know the truth, and to deny or affirm, and keep a watch over and correct our thoughts and words. Just one resentment, one ill feeling engraved on the subconscious, and the soul is a small fountain of bile, tainting and embittering, going against all our fondest wishes. Nothing, not even the most perfect situation, can endure as long as this emotional pollution exists to poison on our every attitude. Religions and holy books are endlessly telling us that we must treat our enemies with forgiveness, for our own sake, not for theirs, but they do not tell us how. The result is that people play with words. I can forgive, but I cannot forget. But the two are inseparable. If one is not forgotten, one is not truly forgiven, and what memories remain beget resentment. Fortunately, there is an infallible formula that lets you forgive and forget at the same time, so that you can achieve that balance that puts peace and goodwill at the center of your life. The formula is an effort of love. St. John, often called the Apostle of Love, repeats the words of the Lord. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love. Love is the fulfillment of the law. It has been said, the man who loves well is the most powerful man in the world, for that man is of and with God, happy and satisfied with his world. Again, the formula is simple. Whenever you feel ill will towards someone or feel resentment over something that has been done to you, whenever you recognize open hostility on your part or a desire to take revenge, then you must force yourself to deliberately recall all the good about the person involved, not forgetting that it's just occurred to arouse your resentment. Try to relive good times spent in his or her company, the times before the resentment set in. Think only of good times, the good qualities about this person. Recall a humorous situation and try to laugh again with the recollection. Once you have achieved this, the miracle has begun. One treatment may not be enough to erase the resentment, but all that's required is repetition, as many times as necessary, and you'll feel the resentment and weaken its hold wash away. This is the real meaning of resist ye not evil, the true way of turning the other cheek. It is loving one's enemies, blessing those who curse us, and praying for those who say evil things about us. By wrapping up bad memories in good ones, we have smothered them into forgettability. Once we have forgotten the feeling of resentment, forgetting the cause of it is automatic. If you do this in all sincerity, you will soon discover a new feeling of freedom. Little things will stop bothering you, and soon those little annoyances will even stop happening. Your life will begin to run smoothly. Best of all, you will have the goodwill of those around you, even those who may not have liked you before. By creating it within yourself, you have created the same peaceful balance in others. Denials and affirmations. Confronting an illness in yourself or another. I deny the appearance of all physical affliction. I do not accept it for myself or anyone else. The only truth lies within my soul, and all sickness flees like a lie before the truth of my words. I have faith that life is health, strength, and joy, and we are all expressions of life. I thank thee, Father, for I know you have heard me. Confronting any fear of your own or another. I deny fear, since God did not create fear. It can have no existence except that which I allow. I reject this appearance which I have created. I let go and banish every shadow of fear within myself or within you. St. John said, love dispels all fear. God is love. I am his child, made of and by his love. Thus I dispel fear. I thank thee, Father, for I know you have heard me. Confronting any sorrow of your own or another's. I deny the very existence of this sorrow, grief, or depression, since it does not come from God. I have no use for negative feelings. I do not accept them. I erase them. God is happiness, pleasure, and joy, and therefore I am all of these well. I thank thee, Father, for I know you have heard me, and I thank thee for these joys, and then list all the good things in your life which bring you joy. Confronting failure and lack. I deny the appearance of any lack in myself or my circumstance. I know that only God's abundance is the truth. I deny failure, for only success and happiness are of God. My word contains everything, and what I desire will come to me in God's perfection. I know you will show me the way, Lord. I thank thee, Father, for I know you have heard me. Confronting any situation of conflict. I deny all that which is inharmonious. I do not accept this of any conflict. God is perfect harmony, and there can be no conflict, setback, or struggle, or any state which opposes the fulfillment of his harmony. I know that the appearance of conflict will vanish. I thank thee, Father, for I know you have heard me. For confronting all that is in conflict with the peace of the world, I deny any appearance which is contrary to goodwill, which is the peace of the world. I thank thee for the truth of thy eternal peace. These events are the creations of those who ignore the truth, and they are of no importance. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Peace is thy will, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I thank thee, Father, for I know you have heard me. I have offered these prayers for you to use as a guideline in creating your own messages or decrees, your own formulas. Remember that we are constantly thinking and expressing attitudes, making decrees almost every moment of our lives. In other words, we are constant at prayer. The vital thing to remember is to keep these constant prayers positive. There is only way to achieve a positive life. It is important to keep within the spirit of the prayer. The effect of a prayer is destroyed if, after affirming, you let yourself slide back to the negative pole. Be in control of your thoughts and words. Do not let diluting or negating thoughts weaken your prayer. Ignore what others say. Remember, they do not know what you are learning. Never forget that wishing good for one is wishing good for all. What you wish for others will come back to you, and what you wish for yourself, you should also wish for others. Your wishes are more valuable than charitable donations, for these last only for the moment, while truth remains forever. Wish for all to come to know the truth. Your wish and the wishes of the millions who have read this book and its companions will enter into the hearts of others, and you will have granted the spiritual gift of knowledge to others. The principle of rhythm, like the pendulum or boomerang, returns like to like. Ani sot qui mali pens means evil to him who evil thinks. But only good can come to one whose thoughts are good. It has been said that God plus one is a majority. This means that one person alone who raises his consciousness to a spiritual plane, using the metaphysical truth of God, can save an organization from ruin, a community, a city, or a nation from crisis. This truth dominates all the planes of existence, and the truth shall make you free. The metaphysical meaning of the Ten Commandments. To this day, it is still unknown whether Moses was who the Bible says he was, or was actually the son of the sister of Pharaoh Ramses II. His name, an Egyptian name, means taken from the waters, and since the Bible is rich in symbolic stories, so written to make sure that the truth these stories are meant to bring us would not be lost in a multitude of translations, the biblical account of Moses being born a Jew and adopted by the princes could also be more symbolic than historical. The point is, the truth of his origin has no effect on his teaching. Moses was an enlightened man, a great master of metaphysical truth, who not only freed the Jews from slavery and the subhuman conditions in which they were living, but also spread his teaching to the nomadic bands who joined the tribes of Israel in the desert. This is one reason why the many people of the Middle East today are almost entirely monotheistic. Among these different races, some were more primitive than others. These had no respect for the property of others, who killed those who obstructed them, who allowed the old to die of hunger, since they had outlived their usefulness, and who considered women no more than communal property. The more civilized Israelites, however, had tasted the lash of slavery, and were more inclined to a better treatment of their fellow man, despite the fact that they had fallen in with the idolatrous ways of the Egyptians and varied desert cultures, forgetting the one God of their fathers. This forced Moses to codify their forgotten standards into a simple set of laws that could be understood by all. He decreed harsh punishment for the disobedience of these divine laws, believing this the only way to tame the beast within. Moses had been educated at the temple of Heliopolis, one of the world's great centers of learning at the time, where he learned mathematics, metaphysics, astrology, numerology, the meaning of numbers, and triple symbolism, which was used in those days to record knowledge for future generations as they evolved. This symbology provides insight into Moses' thinking and into the meaning of the commandments. The first aspect was the simplest, dealing with the everyday life and world of the human being. The second aspect was metaphysical, and dealt with the same conditions as the first on a more abstract mental level. The last, more profound aspect was hieroglyphic, and dealt with human life in a metaphysical sense. This last aspect was said to be so profound that it could only be understood by one whose soul was absolutely pure. All aspects were encompassed by the principle of correspondence, which states, as it is above, so it is below. As it is below, so it is above. Below and above refer to the physical and spiritual planes, the world of everyday existence, and the abstract mental and spiritual world of the soul. What the statement means is simply that all laws act on all levels, and that conditions on one level have their counterpart on the level below and on the level above. The importance of these echoes or correspondence will become clear as we go on. Moses meant the Ten Commandments, or Sefer Bereshit, as the laws are called in Hebrew, to be understood and obeyed on all levels, so that man would not only be guided but educated and awakened by them. The interpretations that follow are as old as the commandments themselves, based on the same symbology Moses learned at Heliopolis and passed on to us by those scholars who have kept the methodology alive through the centuries, and man for the most part obeys these laws on the first level. There are many who complain about the contradictions between dogma and common sense, people who accept the rightness of the commandments but are searching for a higher understanding of things, including the laws we live by. That higher understanding is what this ancient interpretation provides. Let us sum up the Ten Commandments on their literal level. 1. There is but one God, thou shalt not worship any other. 2. Thou shalt not make or worship false images. 3. Thou shalt not take the name of God in vain. 4. Thou shalt keep thy Sabbath day holy. 5. Thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother. 6. Thou shalt not kill. 7. Thou shalt not commit adultery. 8. Thou shalt not steal. 9. Thou shalt not bear false witness. 10. Thou shalt not covet. These laws are of the two kind, 8 of them as prohibitions, beginning with the words, thou shalt not. Only numbers 4 and 5 stand out as recommendations. Taken at the literal level, the 8 are apparently the rules of behavior, outline antisocial acts. And to the less civilized societies of these days, such literal prohibitions were necessary. It was not an easy world. People thought in terms of survival, and gave little thought to behavior that did not contribute to that basic need. One did not kill a member of his family or his tribe because it would be killing one of his protectors, and he would be banished into the desert at least. But when it came to outsiders, the rule was different. An obnoxious Philistine was fair game. It took his codification to declare that killing any fellow human was against God's law, and civilized behavior had to be taught on a legal, habitual basis. Even in these times of relative primitiveness and ignorance, the average person was rarely moved to break the laws. Then as now, it was the minority who ignored the rules. The great majority find the commandments to be natural extensions of the common sense golden rule. There is still murder, theft, lying, and covetousness in the world, true, but these are the act of a minority, those who do not realize that there is indeed a higher law that punishes those who do not live by the rules that protect the rest of society. But most of humanity is ready to look at the commandments we take for granted in a new light, from the vantage point of the second aspect of the three-part symbolism of Moses. The commandments are clear on the literal or physical level. Let's look at them from a purely mental viewpoint. The hieroglyphic or spiritual level is beyond our understanding today, and will remain so until we reach that total purity of soul that permits total enlightenment. Let's examine commandments 6, 8, 9, and 10, against killing, stealing, bearing false witness, and covetousness. At first glance, these are on the same level as thou shalt not walk on the grass, although they carry more stringent penalties. These are actions prohibited by authorities, implying that you may choose to disobey, but you will regret the decision. But there is a difference on the mental level. It's a difference between shall and will. Most languages make a distinction between these verbs. Shall is simply future tense. Will is just that, an act of will. I shall do it means it is going to be done by me. I will do it means I choose to do it. The same is true of thou shalt not. It doesn't mean you must not. It means categorically this is not going to be done by you. It has been said that the meaning carried by these commandments is equivalent to saying, thou shalt not fly to the moon by flapping thy arms. The thought is laughable even to those who aren't aware of the laws of physics and biology that make the effort an impossibility. But you might say that's a statement of fact, not a commandment. And in saying this, you'll have come to the heart of the matter. Because on the mental level, a commandment is a statement of fact. Thou shalt not kill means that you cannot kill. The material body has no will of its own. It can't oppose or impose anything. Life lies within the soul, the spirit, the higher self, and when this life leaves its temporary vehicle of flesh and bones, what remains is indeed a lifeless body. The person with the knife, the gun, the pinch of cyanide has not taken a life. He has merely caused it to move to the next plane of existence, as conscious as ever. And instead of having removed someone who is an obstacle or threat from this life, he has created an even greater one. The law of rhythm is in operation, and the murderer has brought his own death closer. Perhaps it will be an accident, a debilitating disease, or death at the hands of another. It has happened so often that cliches cover the situation. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. It is not God who punishes, but the inexorable order of his law. His principle rules over the universe on every plane, both to repay good and to exact the cost of evil. Order is the first rule of heaven, and every deed is subject to that order. For every human being, every life is created. Ye are counted unto the last hair upon your head. Now you can see why we say that no harm comes to you from any outside force. No one can hurt you unless there is a record of your having done something similar to someone else. No one can ruin your reputation, your business, your happiness, your home, or any of your belongings, nor can you do damage to those of another. There is no such thing as an accident. Nothing happens by pure chance. The great laws protect you. The vast majority of people feel incapable of killing or bringing harm to another human being. It is against the commandments. It is against society's law. It is against the moral grain of most individuals. This is our first line of defense. The second line is the second aspect of the commandment, which tells us that it is impossible to truly accomplish these wrongs, and that our attempt will only bring back the same evil upon us. The boomerang returns to the hurler. Thou shalt not kill is not a limited admonishment referring only to human beings, any more than it refers to only one tribe or group of human beings. No life is to be dismissed as insignificant. Yet there are times when an animal must be killed for the greater good that will result. Even if we adopt the karmic philosophy and accept the possibility that every living creature, down to the microscopic level, has a spirit capable of evolving through incarnation into the most superior of men, we must adopt a common-sense attitude. Common sense is one way by which divine wisdom manifests itself in a human being. This is a fact well worth repeating and memorizing, saying it to yourself whenever you are faced with a doubtful situation. When thinking of life as a precious thing it becomes impossible to draw a line. Is the kitten or puppy, virtually adopted as a member of the family, more deserving of life than the venomous, disease-bearing rat? Both are highly intelligent animals, equals on the evolutionary scale. But what about the venomous serpent, the loathsome cockroach, the infection-producing staphylococcus? All are life. The same is true of the vegetable kingdom. From the flowers we casually sever from their roots to decorate our homes, to the mold that decorates a forgotten crust of bread. These reproach their kind, grow and respond to stimuli, even musk. These are life. In giving us freedom of choice, God has made us judges over the lesser creatures, and we have made judgments. Society has laws against the indiscriminate killing of domesticated animals and endangered species. At the same time, society licenses exterminators and stockyard slaughterhouses. We domesticate bees and fumigate wasps. We cultivate the yeasts that produce fine wines and slaughter disease-producing bacteria by the billions. Common sense has given rise to these laws, and common sense is what we must use on the individual level as well. Let's take a seemingly absurd example. A cockroach scuttles across the floor of your spotless kitchen. Your first instinct is to crush it under your heel or perhaps under the rib. You know that where you see one, there are dozens, perhaps hundreds more. They are a threat to health and cleanliness, and the thought of one crawling on your arm makes your skin do the crawling. Yet the cockroach is one of the most ancient forms of life on earth today, having arrived millions upon millions of years before man, even before the dinosaurs. If longevity is the only guideline, they have more right to be here than we do. But intelligence overweighs longevity. However, the intelligence carries with it responsibility. The words of Genesis 1:26 gives us the clue. Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness. Let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and the beasts of the field, and over all wild beasts, and over the creatures that crawl upon the ground. And thus God created man in his image. In the divine image created he him. Note that the reference to God's image is repeated 3 times. This triple repetition appears often in the Bible, and its intention is to emphasize that a statement is valid on the physical, mental, and spiritual levels. In other words, no further metaphysical explanation should be sought. The truth is before you, eternal and unchanging. Dominion is the power of judgment. Even the cockroach should be accorded conscious judgment. Millions of people believe that even the lowest creatures have souls, or are part of a greater group soul, and that the hive behavior of ants and bees seems to lend evidence to the possibility their activities certainly seem to be governed by a well-ordered group consciousness. Compare the activity of an ant building a nest, the various groups going about their appointed functions with no apparent communication, with the same activities as a modern construction site. If contracts were awarded on dogged efficiency alone, we'd have ants building our condominiums. We might compare the function of the various ant groups to those of various parts of the body, hands, eyes, feet, ears, and forth, all governed by the brain, sent through lines of communication called nerves. Perhaps there is a single intelligence guiding them all. And perhaps that intelligence occupies an equally significant place in the universe as our own. Perhaps it will, in future incarnations, achieve singular intelligence. Hundreds of millions of people believe just that, and I do not consider myself wise enough to scoff at them. Your approach to the cockroach: try this. Think strongly, or even say aloud, there is one cell of this intelligence that is creating disharmony in my environment. I ask the intelligence to remove it and restore harmony. A surprising number of people who have tried this have said that the roach, spider, lizard, or whatever has literally stopped in its track and then changed direction to disappear, never to return. As always, belief in the truth and harmony must underline your words. If the creature appears a second time, or others appear, repeat your words, adding, "Take this cell away, or I may be forced to kill it." If this does not work for any number of reasons, perhaps the creature actually seeks its own death as translation to a higher order, then you must kill it swiftly, painlessly, and with no emotion other than goodwill. May you evolve into a higher species. Your well-meaning thought and intention protect you from the consequence of your action. Many religious groups forbid their followers to eat meat, believing that the vibrations of agony from the animal being killed contaminate the human soul and degrade his physical being as well. Jesus did not agree, saying, "Not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." And Moses said, "Not anyone nor anything can harm us from without, unless we deserve it, unless we accept and believe that it is possible." We have already discussed this truth, and once we know it and remember it, nothing can truly harm us. We have not yet reached the point where we can sustain our bodies without taking in food. In the taste for meat, the need for its nutritional components only reflect our status as an omnivorous animal. Limiting ourselves to a vegetarian diet may not be unhealthy, but it's certainly no sign of spiritual elevation. Cattle are at the pinnacle of evolution for strict vegetarianism, but more simply, it takes more intelligence to hunt than to graze. And that intelligence is more cleansing than dietary restrictions. The higher studies, such as metaphysics, help us to live in a more mental, spiritual world. The power of the mind can cleanse the cells of the body. The power of correspondence tells us, as it is above, so it is below. As it is below, so it is above. Your mind unconsciously tells you what foods are best for you. At the time may well come when you find yourself eating less meat, or even find it distasteful to the point where you can give it up voluntarily. This is all well and good. You have settled on a diet that will produce the best nutritional balance for your body requirement naturally, rather than by someone else's arbitrary decree. When you study the principle of vibration, you will discover that it is indeed possible for a vibration of lower frequency to influence that of a greater one, as in the case of vibration from killed animals. If the person is unaware of the principle of vibration and believes that he can be so influenced, by his belief he subjects himself to a law lower than himself, as Moses stated above. Those are only a few thoughts about the commandments, "Thou shalt not kill," because you cannot kill. Life is positive, indestructible, and eternal. Death is negative, an attempt to deny life, but it is no more than an attempt, for life is undeniable. Thou shalt not steal. From reading the previous chapter, you already know the second or superior aspect of the commandment. You cannot steal, so there is no point in even thinking about it, much less trying. It simply cannot be done. No one can rob you of what belongs to you. They may try to. They may even manage to pick your pocket or burglarize your home. And as long as you remain ignorant of the law and believe you can be robbed, the missing possessions will be lost to you. But once you familiarize yourself with the law, repeat and remember its truth, in one way or another your possessions will return to you, and no one will ever rob you again. In fact, you will never again, as long as you remain conscious of the law, lose or misplace anything. You can prove it yourself the next time you cannot find something and consider it to be lost forever. Repeat the law to yourself and search again in this new light. You will find that you have thought of a new place to look, or you will search where you have already looked and find it, or you will remember circumstance under which you parted with it. This is one of the easiest lessons to learn. Let's examine why nothing can be stolen. Your body contains within itself all the elemental substance of our planet, whether we refer to these fundamentally as earth, air, fire, and water, or the atomic elements from argon to zirconium. Furthermore, you are the sum of all the experience and knowledge of your chemical ancestry, from the first single-cell creature to the billions of specialized cells that make up your body today. On the cellular level, you have deeply buried memories of that first blind groping for food, the first struggle to take oxygen from the air instead of water, these first steps as a thinking, planning biped. These memories are as inseparable part of your body, contains the genetic information needed to create an exact duplicate of your entire body, and none of these experiences or information can ever be lost. And because this experience, this information is cumulative and unforgettable, you can truly never be diminished. Your spiritual evolution can never go backward, only forward. The principle of polarity tells us that like attracts like and opposites repel. Thus we are attracted toward what we are growing to be and pushed on by what we have outgrown. Thus, with the start of every new life, learning the basics becomes easier and easier because we are not learning so much as remembering. By the time a child is born, he has already recapitulated his evolutionary history in the womb, first as a single cell, and on through a water-breathing, then air-breathing stage, until the final development of the complex cerebral cortex of the brain makes him ready to emerge as a human being. The child has already learned the primitive reflexes of hunger, discomfort, response to sight and sounds, and many children from their past experiences show remarkable abilities in certain areas: mathematics, mechanics, athletic coordination, reading, the arts among them. The intelligent child, bored in the classroom, is simply frustrated at the time he must waste in relearning. Though he may never seem to study, exams and conversations will prove that the learning is indeed there. There is a multitude of evidence that reincarnation exists, but it's not mandatory. Free will exists for and in every creature, and just as people here on earth may either take advantage of an opportunity or pass on it, souls existing on the astral plane are free to return to earth in order to continue their individual evolution, to acquire new experience, repay old debts, or reap the rewards of a good life, or to remain in the untroubled stasis of the higher plane. There is no authority to force a soul to return, only the individual desire to improve one's karma, which can only be achieved in the active, bustling physical world of changes. Knowledge and experience are acquisitions which have been bought and paid for, acquired by right of consciousness, which can neither be lost nor stolen, any more than any native ability or talent which can be taken from you. Surprisingly, the same is true of material possessions, for they are the accompaniments of your earned abilities and deeds. Physical objects are earthly parallels of mental and spiritual gains. Everything everyone has learned to use and enjoy, from the comforts of a palatial home to the utility of a simple book of matches, from jewelry to cutlery, remain ours in essence from incarnation to incarnation. So it may be said that those who are born wealthy have earned that wealth already, but it is still up to them to maintain their wealth if they wish to keep it. Or they may lose it, perhaps as a means of improving their karma. As Jesus said, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust do corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But rather lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust do corrupt, and no thieves break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart also be." Matthew 6:19-21. Like all the proverbs of the Bible, this is significant on the material, mental, and spiritual levels. But now you understand that there is no need to live in fear of thieves. If you live in constant worry of robbery, being overcharged, or embezzled from, you can now live in peace. And should something be taken from you, simply say to yourself the truth. Nothing that is mine by right of consciousness can be lost or stolen from me. Then forget the loss and be patient. Soon someone will return the item to you. You will receive a gift to replace it, or something of equal or greater value will come to you. What is earned cannot be taken from you. Thou shalt not steal, because you cannot, and neither can anyone else. But don't take my word for it. Use the thought and treatments in this chapter to prove it for yourself. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Many people wonder why there is no specific commandment against lying, and then are satisfied the 9th commandment covers the situation. In fact, all wrongdoing is a fundamental lie, in that it contravenes the truth of harmony, and lies are covered more specifically in the first 3 commandments, as we shall later see. The whole of the commandments is an exposition of truth and a warning against every pretense and falsehood that mankind is heir to. But perhaps because of this lack of specific admonishment against lying in everyday life, man continues to distort the truth at his convenience. The commandments refer to the spoken or written word, that which bears the lie. The lie cannot truly exist because there is only truth on all planes, and because the law will return the appearance of the lie to you, to your detriment. Election time, sad to say, is a prime example of human capacity for bearing false witness. We see parties and individuals publicizing statements of untruth and innuendo, and after the dust has settled, the winner begins his tenure secure in the belief that he has been recognized as the better man, whatever the truth or falsehood of his campaign claims. But he will be recognized by his actions, not his words, by his fruits. Emerson said it well. What you are shouts so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. The commandment says that what you see is your own conception of things. If you see beauty, it is a reflection of the beauty, the truth within you. And if you see only ugliness, your words will reflect the falsehood within you, and you deny the reality that is truth. And when you bear false witness, it is only testimony against yourself. We have learned that the true self is perfect, having all the beauty of its creator, since it was created by, with, and from the essence of God. And this self, this being, is an expression of truth, yours and that of everyone else. And when we display an attitude of ugliness, of falsehood, we display only ignorance of our own creative power, which is thought, or the recognition that ugliness cannot exist. Lies cannot exist in the face of the truth, which is all. Those who lie are not evil. They are but children who have yet to learn to recognize truth. When you give a small child modeling clay or crayons, you don't expect him to start churning out works that will rival those of Michelangelo, at least not for the first few weeks. You do expect a gradual learning process as he gains the experience of discovering the limitation of his materials and his abilities, to learn by his mistakes in achievement past and present. And he must learn to create what he sees. This is true of all of us, and if we want to change what we see, we must change our way of thinking about what we see. Thus you know that by recognizing falsehood for what it is, you project and establish truth not only in your own eyes, but in those of others. By thinking and declaring the truth, lies and misunderstanding begin to disappear. Truth is life, and a lie is a hopeless attempt to negate truth. A lie has no life of its own and can only exist by virtue of the power you give it, and truth is your source of power. Your being or self is as perfect as everything else created by God. It is only appearance of ugliness and wickedness, flaws and imperfection that you create for yourself. But since these are but illusions, you have only to deny them strongly, stating the truth of your perfect essence, and the false testimony of your imperfection will begin to change for you and for all around you. The truth is not changed. You have merely learned to recognize it, and have shown others your truth by your example. Truth can no more be changed than God can be offended. We occasionally hear a man's actions being an offense to God. God cannot be offended or hurt by man, and nothing can mar or weaken a principle. Can a fish change the currents of the sea? Thou shalt not covet. When an idea, a creation, springs forth from the divine mind, it already contains everything necessary for its complete development. It's inconceivable that God would send us an incomplete idea and allow us to frustrate ourselves trying to complete the puzzle. God is infinite wisdom, love, and justice. He does not tease his children. The universe is based on logic and order. The perfect harmony that exists in all its parts can be seen wherever we look, from the path of the planets to the masterful engineering of an ant colony. Once this knowledge is acquired, we realize that nothing which is necessary is missing from our lives. When we have more than we need or want for our own happiness, it is there for the happiness of others. Science says that nature abhors a vacuum, and this is demonstrably true. Even so-called empty space is crowded with dust motes and hydrogen clouds and random molecules drifting in their path toward becoming something else. Life is constantly searching for something to animate. This is its purpose. A small pot of earth left in any moist environment will soon host a stray seed and a sprout forth. A forgotten glass of water will soon be swimming with larvae. Before a child is conceived, the womb is prepared to receive, nurture, and protect the seed until it develops into a complete human being. The same is true of the eggs of birds, reptiles, and insects, the seeds and spores of plant life. All contain the needs for the development of the complete creature. With man, completeness is fulfillment, and God has provided the seeds for this in every man. Therefore, a man can lack for nothing. Everything has been foreseen and has been made available. And God completed the package by telling us, "Thou shalt not covet." In other words, that we have no need to envy or desire the possessions or good fortunes of another, because we have but to ask for the things we want for ourselves. They are already ours. It is written in the Bible, "Ask and it shall be given unto you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you." These are not idle words. These were meant to be taken seriously and literally. Note the idea was expressed 3 times. The size of your desire, the scope of your dreams in general, is a measure of your need, and an indication of how close that need is to being fulfilled. Ask for what you want and give thanks to God in the same breath. Do so without doubt, and you shall receive. Your wish may come true through natural occurrence, through the generosity of a friend, or as a miracle. I remember an occasion when I was in New Orleans without a penny to my name. A transfer of funds had been late, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and the bank wouldn't open till Monday, and I knew no one in the city. However, I knew the truth and declared it, standing on the sidewalk. My Father contains everything. There is nothing missing in creation. Father, I thank thee, for I know thou hast heard me. At that very moment, a green piece of paper was borne on the wind towards me and wrapped itself around my ankle. Knowing someone must have dropped it, I waited with the $5 bill in my hand to see if anyone was looking for it. No one was in sight. It was meant to be mine. It lasted me until Monday with enough left over for a taxi ride to the bank, where my money was waiting. A miracle or a happy coincidence? I wonder if there's a difference. Miracles don't occur because a principle has been violated, as many churches once believed, but by the proper action of that principle. We are applying the principle by asking it to work in our behalf. A principle cannot be altered. As one of my teachers said, if the law of gravity were suspended to prevent a man from falling from a building, it wouldn't be a miracle, it would be chaos. If you look, you'll find that logical explanations behind every miracle, but what happens is still just as miraculous. The first commandment. The first 3 commandments may be viewed as one, since they all refer to the nature of God. And in fact, there is a difference or opinion between branches of Christianity as to whether these are 3 or 4 separate commandments. I have written them as one. The number here refer only to the text that follows. 1. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. 2. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. 3. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto the thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. 4. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. In this commandment the phrase, the Lord thy God, appears 3 times, signifying that it is to be taken literally on the material, mental, and spiritual levels. He is the creator of all things. He is the supreme law or principle. He is that which dwells within us, the higher self, that is one with God the creator and God the principle. These are 3 literal aspects of the one God. Egypt is the symbol of earthly things, of the primitive man who is yet to reach this concept of a single, all-powerful and invisible God. The Egyptians worshipped many gods and bowed down before many graven images. There was one attempt to introduce monotheism to Egypt on the part of Pharaoh Imhotep, Akhenaten, but it was never accepted and died with him. Only Moses and his followers gave momentum to the new concept. This is why 1 refers to Egypt in bondage and commands, "Thou shalt have no other god before me." The earthly interpretation meant exactly what it said, that there was but one God, and that he forbade the creation of any other gods in any form. In 2 he stipulates such forms similar to those of the Egyptians, and in 3 he clearly forbids the worship of such images, threatening punishment for his false worship and promising mercy for those who obey his laws. To many in future generations these words seemed almost childish, and they were reinterpreted, notably by the prophet Ezekiel. Their reluctance to accept the literal meaning of the words demonstrated the development of humanity over the generations. Today the symbolic meaning is clear. I am God who led you out of the bondage of materialism. I am the only source of all earthly and spiritual power. Do not attribute such power to any other. Do not shape images in your mind for the purpose of worshiping them. Do not attempt to worship anything or creature which is in your earthly experience, for I am invisible, and these are but my creations. If you attempt these things, my law will return your error to you, and to those you have taught to follow in your error. But if you will follow in the truth, the manifestation of your errors will be corrected. I will bestow mercy on those who follow my commandment. Many of the Hebrews continued to take these words so literally that until recently there was no sign of any image in their synagogues. The same literalism in interpreting the Bible is true in many Christian denominations as well. The Levites so burdened themselves with the restriction and impositions found in Leviticus that they could never fulfill the more than 600 requirements and rituals prescribed for daily existence. They condemned themselves to what they thought was failure in the eyes of God. The Bible was never meant to be read this way. It is a psychological and metaphysical treatise, a book of truth. It does not give orders. It explains and provides advice for all circumstances of life on all levels of existence. Finally, 4, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain," refers to errors we have already discussed. It means not to invoke the name of Lord in asking for what you do not truly want. You do not really want God to damn anyone to hell, and if you ask it, you are only asking misfortune for yourself. You will not be held guiltless asking for such favors. The commandment also refers to your name as well, for on the higher plane you are part of God. You are not to abuse your own best interests with such phrases as my bad memory, my lousy luck, my poor health, and so on. The law will not hold you guiltless. It will live up to your words because they are decrees made in your name, the name of your highest self, which is of God. Thou shalt not fornicate. I have changed this chapter heading from that in the table of contents to illustrate a point, that the words Moses handed down were also changed. The original was, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." The same change was made in Matthew 19:9, probably by the same ecclesiastical zealot. It has been suggested that at the time these changes were made, the word fornication referred only to adulterous activity. Possibly this is so, but the change is still a gratuitous one. Fornication refers to sexual activity while unmarried. Adultery refers to sexual activity on the part of married people outside of marriage. The Latin root is ad, to by, plus alter, other. This is not so incidentally the same basis for the word adulterate, meaning pollution or dilution by some other material, which makes the insertion of this word into the Bible an adulteration itself. Note also that adultery in the Bible is often used in the sense of idolatry, worshiping another. This sense is also a part of the commandment. It would have been impossible for a man as wise and enlightened as Moses, schooled as he was in Hermetic principles, to have instructed man to try and defy the principle of generation. The principle works automatically on every plane. It is the same principle which causes atomic attraction and the formation of molecules. The laws of attraction, cohesion, and adhesion are integral parts of principles, as are gravity, magnetism, and on the atomic level, strong force and weak force. Without these forces, no matter would have existed above the level of the most basic subatomic material. Attraction is the affinity of particles. Adhesion is the self-determination of the individual atom to accept or reject another atom or particle. Cohesion is the ability of atoms to clump together. The strength of these laws is given awesome expression in the energy required to split the atom, and the energy given off when it happens. The principle is equally expressed among people, as is the principle of correspondence. As it is above, so it is below. As it is below, so it is above. Or as the Kybalion says, it is by studying the monad, the most primitive unit of life, that one reaches the angel. Principles act automatically. The laws of adhesion and cohesion among atoms might well be termed fornication between humans, yet it is a process that goes on throughout the natural kingdoms. It is as automatic as the bee's transmission of pollen from one flower to another. Are we to presume that the Creator would hinder or prohibit the process he set in motion? It's common knowledge that by opposing a principle or force, we multiply the force driving it. A dammed river will find another course, or a lake will form, building up potential energy, the principle behind hydroelectric power. We are still of an animal kingdom. We still reproduce through the sexual process. Perhaps we shall evolve beyond this stage of development to a point where the principle of generation manifests itself in another way. But we are still a long way from graduating to a higher order of existence as a species. Students often ask, when presented with this concept, if we all evolved at once, what would happen to the human race? The answer lies in your point of view. We would still be we, whatever our state of being, and another evolving spirit might well come up to fill a gap and call themselves humanity. There will always be someone at the lower levels. This at one level of meaning in Jesus saying, the poor he shall always have you with. He meant not only the economically poor, but the undeveloped in knowledge, experience, and evolution as well. Revelation also states that the Lord announced that at this time of evolution, no more children will be born. Perhaps we are entering that phase even now, for though population is increasing at an incredible rate, birth rates will soon start to decline. Another description of this evolutionary era was given by Jesus as, when the veil of shame falls. This is when we realize the shame is artificial, that the veil, which is ignorance, can hide its truth. And when truth is universally known, we will be ready for that evolutionary graduation. A perfect example of that veil of ignorance is the erroneous use of the word fornication. By focusing so much attention on the natural, we have made it seem unnatural. In effect, we have tried to oppose the principle of generation, and it simply can't be done. By stemming that river, we have caused it to seek other channels, and we have produced mental aberrations, sexual deviation, frustration, dishonor, shame, and punishment, much of it due to the arbitrary substitution of a single word. Bonsai trees, small and twisted, have their beauty as curiosities, but they are still distortions of what was meant to be, stunted versions of what might have been without intervention, as are the caged bird, the chained leopard, the gilded stallion. We have modified truth and modified the scriptures out of ignorance, or to gain power over others. Metaphysically, the meaning of thou shalt not commit adultery is, thou shalt not misinterpret or misapply the law, because you will not be able to. Because you are tempted to do so will only bring misery back on yourself. The commandment refers to the very fanaticism through it which has been itself misinterpreted. To Jesus, that fanaticism was more repulsive, more deserving of punishment than unfettered sexuality. As he expressed it, woe unto thee, Chorazin, woe unto thee, Bethesda, for it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment than for thee. Chorazin and Bethesda were the centers of religious zealotry and fanaticism in these days, while Tyre and Sidon were known for their sexual profligacy. Thus he was saying that fanaticism was far more punishable in the eyes of the Lord than sexual transgression. What about adultery in the strict sense? Let us go back to Matthew 19:3-12. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away, divorce his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. They said unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement, and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart suffered you to put your wives away. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall marry another, except it be for fornication, committeth adultery, and whosoever marrieth her that is put away doth commit adultery. The double parentheses above indicate the post-scriptural adulteration I referred to earlier. Jesus did not believe that two wrongs make a right. His disciples say unto him, If the case of a man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. But he said unto them, All men cannot receive this saying, saving them to whom it was given. For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs made eunuchs by other men, and there were eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to say it, let him receive it. The case referred to is abstention from sexual activity, whether from physical or psychological impotence or by choice. Christ's answer here is that if they choose to marry, the two are still one flesh, in at least the spiritual sense, and that is the sense that counts. The principle of generation is still active in the laws of attraction, adhesion, and cohesion. If a woman seeks gratification outside the marriage because of the situation, is this adultery? Technically and physically, yes. But is it an exception to the rule? No. And Christ implies that this is none of our business, that it is between the man and wife. Some people can handle a situation, some cannot. Him that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Now let's go back to the metaphysical side of the question. There is a balance in the sexes, in that there is indeed a man for every woman, for these are two halves of a spiritual cell. They are created as one and indivisible. On the earthly plane they are separate beings, but the original attraction is unavoidable. On earth there is a constant search for one's other half, but even if that search is fruitless, the two will ultimately be joined in the spiritual realm. This is encouraging news for people who are lonely or have been made the wrong match, to know that the other perfect half is waiting. And if we find that match on earth, no power on earth can separate them. We have met and joined our true partners in past lives, and it is that memory that kindles our continuous search for him and her. Man has clung to the saying, That which God has joined together, let no man put asunder. But it has been misinterpreted as a reference to marriage, which is a civil or religious ceremony, and not to the true spiritual union forged by God, which is the marriage may or may not represent. This saying is not an indictment of divorce, which is simply another human convenience, but a consolation offered by a loving God, telling us that, whatever else happens, that true union still exists and cannot be severed. Jesus spoke in parables, stories in which the meaning was clear in the situation, not merely in the words, which he knew would suffer in translation or even in repetition. The words might change, but the story and the metaphor does not. Jesus' reference to the eunuch is parabolic. It can be taken in a literal sense and still be seen for the analogy which it is. His reference to eunuchs, for the kingdom of heaven's sake, refers to those who have chosen to channel their human energies, including the sexual drive, into a dedication to the studies that will help them evolve toward a higher being, even in this earthly environment. This is the basis for the justification of a celibate priesthood. As Jesus said, He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. This is one commandment that scholars and ecclesiastics are most reluctant to discuss. Even Jesus was a bit cryptic, couching his answers in parable form. The reason is that we are still earthbound animals, barely into a true mental state. There is a conflict within us between pure reason and our instincts and drives, and maintaining a balance is most difficult. Let us remember the real meaning of the commandment that we cannot commit adultery, and if trying we bring hurt to another, that hurt will surely come back to us. Let us also remember the time when a woman caught in adultery was brought before Jesus. According to the laws of Israel, she should have been stoned to death. Jesus stooped and wrote idly in the earth at his feet. They continued to ask his opinion, and he responded, He that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone at her. Again he stooped and wrote in the earth. When he looked up, the woman stood alone. He asked her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She answered, No man, Lord. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Recommended further reading: The Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, Lessons in Truth by H. Emil Caddy, The Daily Word, a monthly periodical, and The Kabbalion. End of chapter, end of book. This audio presentation of Metaphysics for Everyone by Connie Mendez has been brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2014, all rights reserved.